No, equal force isn't the name of an 80s action cartoon, isochronous isn't what the characters shout out when victorious, and Armin Strom is definitely not the central villain. Hi, I'm Zach Weiss, co-founder of Worn Around, and today I want to tell you about the Armin Strom Gravity Equal Force, a watch that doesn't just look wild and unique, but does something rather special too. It's not often I get to spend some time with a watch like the Gravity Equal Force, a true piece of high-end horology from one of the most revered independent brands currently in operation. So I can't help but feel like, to discuss it, I must take a different approach. This is a nearly $30,000 watch. It's not for everyone. Heck, it's not for most people. And those that do want it or can buy it probably don't need convincing on the quality and craftsmanship. At this price, everything should be beyond reproach. Design is, of course, a different matter, one that comes down to taste and preferences. The Gravity Equal Force line, which all share the same basic layout but different colors, textures, and some materials, is thoroughly and unapologetically modern, veering into the realm of the exotic and strange. They feature dials with offset time indication that merge with the movement below, with a microrotor mounted topside and an exposed barrel. Not your typical watch, and definitely not for everyone. So what am I doing here? Well, I wanted to talk about what the Gravity Equal Force does, because as a watch enthusiast, it's fascinating. And it's also really nerdy, and frankly, I have no one else to talk about these things with. But before getting into it, as this could very well be your first encounter with Armin Strom, let's quickly talk about the brand. Armin Strom has had two eras. The first began in 1967 when Armin Strom founded his eponymous company. He specialized in watch and pocket watch restoration, as well as hand skeletonization, which became the hallmark of his own creations. He actually went on to win a Guinness record in 1990 for the world's smallest skeletonized movement. The second era began in 2006 when Mr. Strom sold the brand to Serge Michel and Claude Griesler, two friends from childhood that had spent time at the Armin Strom atelier growing up. Serge Michel's background is in business, while Claude Griesler's is in watchmaking and movement development. By 2009, they had set up a manufacturer in BLBN, and by 2010 had launched their first new watch. 10 years and several watches later, including their remarkable work with resonance, Armin Strom launched the Gravity Equal Force, which introduced their System 78 collection, named 78 because of the year of the current owners were born. The collection was conceived to offer haute horology at more accessible price points, which is obviously a relative thing as these are still very expensive objects, but they do something special that you typically have to pay quite a lot more for. And here's where we can start getting to the meat and potatoes of this video. The name of the watch spells it out: equal force. Mechanical time-telling devices all suffer from the same issue: variations in accuracy across their power reserve, which is to say that when a watch, we'll stick with watches for obvious reasons, is fully wound, it will keep different time than when close to unwound, and in between, that accuracy will change gradually. This is because the mainspring in your watch is putting out more torque at the beginning than at the end, which makes logical sense. Just think of a wind-up toy slowing down. This affects the amplitude of the escapement and thus the accuracy, because balance wheels are not isochronous, meaning the duration of an oscillation, how long it takes to swing, and amplitude, how far it swings, are not independent. So what's a watch to do? Constant force, which is to say supply the escapement with consistent equal power so that the accuracy of the watch is the same across the entire power reserve. And there are several mechanisms that are employed by brands to do this, such as a fusée and chain and remontoir. The former being literally a tiny chain that is connected to the barrel where the mainspring is stored, and a conical pulley, the fusée. As the power reserve decreases, the pull of the chain increases, compensating for the difference. Remontoirs work differently. Basically, they act as an intermediary power source for the escapement. Remontoirs feature springs that are wound by the mainspring over short intervals. Some are a second, some 10, some 8, some 60, etc. Once they are wound up, they release said energy to the escapement, providing consistent power until there just isn't enough juice to wind the remontoire itself. You're not going to find either a fusée and chain or a remontoire constant force on anything below 30K as far as I can tell. Which brings me, finally, back to the Gravity Equal Force, which uses neither of these mechanisms, but rather a stopwork mechanism, specifically called a Geneva or Maltese Cross, which is more fun to say. This is a funky looking star-shaped widget that on the gravity equal force is visible through a little hole in the top side of the barrel. The idea here is that there is an ideal zone of torque within the power reserve of a mainspring. And in this zone, the torque is close to consistent or constant. Thus, the amplitude is consistent and timekeeping precise. The Geneva Cross essentially prevents the watch from unwinding by literally stopping the rotation. Yes, that means it reduces the power reserve. So on a watch like the gravity equal force, which has a 72-hour reserve, the mainspring could actually go for longer, but is prevented. Now, I've seen some conversations saying these aren't true constant force mechanisms. Perhaps that's why Armin Strom call it an equal force, but the end goal is the same. And clearly, the complexity compared to a fusée chain or remontoir is far less, likely leading to the less expensive watch. So that's the core of what the gravity equal force does. But there's more that makes this watch special, and includes a first in watchmaking. Stopwork mechanisms are nothing new, if uncommon, but until now, they've always been featured in manual winding movements. This is the first and only automatic with a stopwork mechanism. In order to achieve this, Armin Strom also had to develop a D-clutch system. Look, I said earlier this was super nerdy stuff. Yes, a D-clutch stopwork automatic is something that is genuinely exciting to me, but it gets even better, or nerdier, you decide. The whole mechanism is located within the barrel containing the mainspring and has a little power reserve on top which is directly linked to the Maltese cross mechanism. And this isn't your ordinary barrel. Rather, it's another piece of old pocket watchmaking tech called a motor barrel. This one is a bit more straightforward. Basically, it's a barrel that works in reverse. The barrel turns to wind the mainspring rather than the arbor, the shaft within, which then turns as the barrel unwinds, which is to say drives the gear train. This was originally conceived for pocket watches to protect the movement if a mainspring broke, sending the power out through the winding system rather than into the delicate escapement. Okay, so to quickly summarize, the Armin Strom gravity equal force is the first and only automatic watch with a declutching stopwork mechanism located in a motor barrel that guarantees greater precision by controlling the force from the mainspring to the escapement by only utilizing the optimal portion of the power reserve. I mean, I think that's rad. Typically, when a brand wants to flex, they make a tourbillon or maybe a perpetual calendar or a split seconds chronograph. Something cool and complicated, but also a bit showy. They all have bells and whistles. Something you can point at to your friends to make them say ooh and ah. Armin Strom makes a watch that should theoretically be more precise thanks to regulating torque and takes way too long to explain as evidenced by this video. It's a watch nerd's watch. But let's be honest, the fun doesn't stop there. This is a gorgeous watch that is made to an incredibly high standard. The movement is the watch, which is emphasized by the sapphire display on this specific version, exposing all the mechanics. It's all meticulously finished by hand and features various graining techniques and quite a bit of polished bevels, including some very tight interior angles, such as on the finger bridges located dial side, so really on display. This specific version, which is the newest at time of recording, is called the Ultimate Sapphire Purple. The sapphire I already mentioned, but the purple refers to the movement plate that has been guillocheed with a barley grain by Kari Voutilainen, one of the most highly regarded independents. I wouldn't call this watch a collab though. It's more like when a band features a really good guitarist from another band on their track, adding some flair. But while the guilloche brings some classical beauty, this watch is all about the machine. Though highly finished, there's also something raw about the way it's displayed. The microrotor up at 12 isn't decorated in your typical haute fashion. It's not gold or platinum nor features graining. Rather, it's oddly technical with exposed screws and rivets. Likewise, the barrel beneath it, the secret star of the show, is understated, with the words equal force etched in almost like a warning on some piece of industrial machinery. The window through showing the Maltese cross and a tiny black polished power reserve arrow are very if you know moments. Well, at least now you know. From the back, the show continues with a movement design that is anything but typical, featuring a geometric design that reinforces the topside's industrial appeal. The balance sits off to one side, held by a single finger bridge, hovering over a purple surface, furthering the modern avant-garde spirit of the design. Once again, all finished to the highest standards. This is all housed in a 41 by 48 by 12.65 millimeter steel case with some unique aesthetic features as well, such as indented lugs and a small chin on the bezel, which is a nod to the original Armin Strom brand's design language. Though a sizable case, the watch is all dial, making the case sort of disappear in the shadow of everything else. With that said, if I were to make one critique, the case doesn't feel quite as high-end as the dial and movement, almost coming off too simple. One last thing to touch on, and that is the price point again. The Ultimate Sapphire Purple version is $28,900 USD, but the base version of the EqualForce is $21,000, and when they first launched, they were under $20K. Value is a relative thing, and in the watch industry, the meaning of that word is stretched to its absolute limits. But given what this watch does, given how it's made, given what constant force mechanism watches typically cost, it, well, is a value in the industry. But for the sake of being thorough, I will point out that Dornbluth & Son do make watches with an in-house movement called the Quintus that feature Maltese cross mechanisms as well. They start at around 10K, are manual wind only, and are far more traditional in their styling. Still very cool watches and worth checking out as a potential alternative. Okay, let's wrap this up. I'll go back to the beginning when I said I don't often get to spend time with a watch like this, and to be fair, few do. The Armin Strom Gravity EqualForce is a singular design and concept. No other watch is really comparable in design and features save others from Armin Strom. Though it qualifies as a luxury watch, obviously, its appeal is different than that of typical big brands. It's not about the air of the finer things. No, this is a watch about watchmaking, about the love of it, about the continued pursuit of innovation in an industry that does something we don't actually need anymore. Frankly, it's art. Mechanical, nerdy, and fascinating. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. See you next time.